What if I told you the most dangerous person in any room isn't the one yelling, threatening, or demanding attention, but the quiet one in the corner who's been pushed too far? The one who watched, listened, absorbed everything, and said nothing. Not because they were weak, but because they were calculating. That person is often the empath. And once you understand what's really going on inside them, you'll realize they're not soft. They're not fragile. They're not naive. They're a storm waiting to happen. See, most people think of empaths as gentle souls, overly emotional, easy to manipulate, too nice for their own good. But that's the surface. Beneath it lies something much deeper, something Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists in history, spent his life studying. Jung discovered that every person holds within them both light and shadow. Most people avoid their shadow, empaths. They're forced to confront it early, often through betrayal, gaslighting, or emotional manipulation. And that confrontation, it changes everything. This isn't just psychology, it's a transformation. The empath's journey isn't about breaking down, it's about waking up. And once they do, they don't become less emotional. They become emotionally intelligent. They don't stop caring. They start choosing. And that, more than anything else, is what makes them unstoppable. Stay with me, because once you understand this transformation, you'll never see quiet people the same way again. Empathy is one of the most misunderstood traits in human psychology. Most people see it as a weakness, something soft, passive, maybe even a little naive. They think empaths are just emotional sponges, constantly overwhelmed, too sensitive to survive in a harsh world. But what if that sensitivity is actually something else entirely? What if it's not weakness at all, but a highly advanced form of perception, something closer to a superpower? Carl Jung believed that every person wears a mask, a persona we show the world to fit in, to be accepted. But underneath that mask is the shadow, the parts of us we suppress, deny, or simply don't know how to face. Most people spend their lives running from that shadow. But empaths, they live with it every day. Because when you feel everything, your pain, others' pain, even the unspoken emotions in a room, you can't hide from the darkness. You have to face it. And that's where the shift begins. Empaths aren't just emotional. They're emotionally intelligent. They don't just feel what others feel. They decode it, analyze it, and remember it. While others are distracted by surface-level emotions, empaths are seeing the full picture. And once they realize what they're capable of, once they stop apologizing for their depth and start embracing it, that's when things get dangerous. Because emotional intelligence in the hands of someone who's been hurt becomes a weapon wrapped in wisdom. No one becomes powerful without pain. And for empaths, that pain often comes in the form of betrayal. Not just once, but over and over. Friends who take advantage, partners who manipulate, family members who gaslight. At first, the empath tries to make sense of it, thinking, maybe I just need to be more understanding. Maybe they didn't mean to hurt me. But deep down, something begins to change. Carl Jung believed that true transformation begins when the mask cracks, when the persona we show the world no longer matches the truth we feel inside. And betrayal is what cracks that mask wide open for empaths. When someone who loves deeply is lied to, ignored, or used, they don't just get hurt, they start to wake up. They begin to see the gap between who they've been and who they need to become to survive. That's when the integration starts. Jung called it individuation, a process where the self becomes whole by facing both light and shadow. For most people, this takes years, sometimes a lifetime. But for empaths who've been broken repeatedly, it happens fast. The pain forces them inward. And inside that pain, they find something unexpected: strength. Not the kind that yells or fights, the kind that sees clearly and no longer flinches. And once that process begins, there's no going back. Because what rises from betrayal is someone who's seen the truth and decided to never be blind again. There comes a moment, quiet but powerful, when an empath stops asking, "Why did they hurt me?" and starts thinking, "I've seen this before." That moment is the beginning of something Jung called the emergence of the self. It's not a sudden outburst. It's not revenge. It's clarity. It's the shift from reaction to recognition. You see, every emotional wound leaves a pattern. The lies, the guilt trips, the emotional games. Empaths remember them all. Not out of bitterness, but instinct. Their brains begin cataloguing every red flag, every manipulation, every tiny shift in energy. While others overlook the warning signs, the empath is taking notes, quietly, consistently, and with razor-sharp precision. Carl Jung believed that transformation happens when we stop being driven by unconscious pain and start using that pain as information. For the empath, this is the turning point. They're no longer just feeling, they're analyzing. Every betrayal becomes data. Every deception becomes evidence. It's not emotional overload anymore. It's emotional intelligence, sharpened through survival. This is where things start to get dangerous for anyone who tries to manipulate them again. Because once the empath realizes they've been through this same storm before, they don't panic. They don't plead. They recognize the pattern, step back, and start moving differently. Calmly, strategically, powerfully. And that's when everything begins to shift. Because now they're not just surviving, they're evolving. The game only works when you don't know you're playing. That's how manipulators survive. By staying one step ahead of people who haven't caught on yet. But when an empath wakes up, something shifts. They've seen the game before. They've felt the bait and switch, the love bombing, the guilt traps, and instead of getting pulled back in, they go still. Carl Jung called this moment psychological autonomy, when a person no longer reacts out of fear, pain, or habit, but chooses their responses with full awareness. For the empath, this is the first taste of real power, not because they're trying to control others, but because they've stopped being controlled. Manipulators depend on predictable behavior. They need you to chase them, to justify yourself, to argue, cry, explain, beg. But when an empath reaches this stage, they stop doing all of that. There's no argument, no performance, just a calm refusal to engage. And that silence, that's what terrifies the manipulator, because silence from an empath means the emotional cord has been cut. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. They're not withdrawing out of fear. They're stepping back because they finally see what's been happening all along. And the moment they choose peace over chaos, that's the moment they rewrite the rules. Because now, the empath isn't reacting to the world. They're shaping their own. Most people break when they're torn between opposites, between love and pain, trust and betrayal, hope and disappointment. But Carl Jung discovered something remarkable. He called it the transcendent function, the ability to hold tension between contradictions without collapsing. And empaths, especially those who've been wounded deeply, often master this without even realizing it. Because they've lived in extremes, they've trusted too much and been betrayed too often. They've given without limits and been drained without mercy. And yet, somehow, they endure. They don't harden into bitterness, they sharpen into discernment. That's not weakness, it's psychological resilience of the highest order. The awakened empath doesn't swing from one emotional extreme to the next. They learn to hold both at once. They can care deeply and still walk away. They can feel everything and still stay grounded. They don't numb themselves. They refine themselves. And that quiet control, it's what makes them unstoppable. This is where empathy transforms from a reactive trait into a conscious choice. The empath no longer absorbs every emotion around them. Instead, they begin to observe, to assess, to decide. They stop bleeding for people who keep handing them the knife. They start conserving their energy for people who respect their depth. And when empathy becomes intentional, it becomes power. There's a point where the empath stops asking why someone hurt them and starts seeing how it all fits together. That's when the illusion cracks. The manipulator's charm, transparent. The excuses, predictable. The guilt trips, powerless. Because at this stage, the empath isn't internalizing the damage anymore, they're reflecting it back. Carl Jung called this phenomenon psychological mirroring. Empaths are natural mirrors. They reflect what people project, sometimes light, sometimes darkness. But when they've been betrayed enough times, something in them shifts. They stop absorbing dysfunction and start exposing it, not with rage, not with revenge, with truth. Cold, clear, quiet truth. And here's what makes that so powerful. Manipulators thrive in chaos. They rely on confusion, on keeping you emotionally off balance. But when an empath reaches clarity, the game ends. Because clarity isn't just awareness, it's immunity. You can't guilt someone who sees through the manipulation. You can't gaslight someone who trusts their own perception more than your lies. The empath no longer flinches when someone's mask slips. They expect it. They've studied it. And now they're not trying to fix the dysfunction. They're simply done entertaining it. That moment of detachment, it's not the end of a relationship. It's the beginning of the empath's freedom. Because when truth becomes your mirror, no one can lie their way back into your life. For most of their life, the empath has been taught to tone it down. Don't be too emotional. Don't be too intense. Don't be too much. So they learned to shrink, to overgive, to apologize for things that weren't their fault. But underneath all that silence and softness was a version of themselves waiting to be unleashed. A version that knew how to say no, walk away, and protect their energy without guilt. Carl Jung believed that the shadow doesn't just hold our darkness, it holds our unlived potential. And for empaths, that shadow often contains the strength they were taught to suppress. Betrayal, ironically, becomes the key to unlocking it. Every time someone crosses their boundary, it forces them to build one. Every time they're used, they get closer to understanding their worth. And eventually, all those suppressed traits, confidence, clarity, self-respect, they stop hiding. They come roaring back. But this transformation isn't aggressive. It's grounded. It's not about becoming heartless. It's about becoming whole. The empath doesn't stop being kind. They just stop being available to people who mistake kindness for weakness. They don't stop caring. They start caring selectively. And they do it with the calm certainty of someone who no longer needs to prove their value to anyone. Because once they reclaim the parts of themselves they were told to bury, they become someone no one saw coming. There comes a moment in the empath's journey when they no longer bend, chase, explain, or shrink. They stop waiting to be chosen. They stop negotiating their worth. This is what Carl Jung called psychological sovereignty. The moment a person becomes the authority over their own emotional world. And once an empath reaches this stage, they don't just walk away from dysfunction. They rise above it completely. They no longer rescue people who enjoy drowning. They don't pour their light into black holes hoping to be seen. They don't trade peace for connection or self-respect for approval. Instead, they choose their place in the world with intention. They give their energy where it's earned, not where it's expected. And they no longer fear being alone, because now they've become excellent company for themselves. Carl Jung believed that the most powerful individuals are those who've integrated both their light and their shadow. The empath, who's walked through betrayal and come out whole, embodies this perfectly. They've turned pain into clarity, sensitivity into strength, suffering into wisdom. They are no longer reactive. They are responsive. And that response is calm, grounded, and unshakable. This is the fully awakened empath. Not soft, not broken, but sovereign. And that is the most terrifying thing a manipulator can face. Someone who once would have done anything for your love, now doesn't need your permission to thrive. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you found value here today, consider subscribing, because this is just the beginning. The journey inward, that's where the real transformation begins.